time the district is created, the property value that's within that boundary is frozen. The taxes that are paid by that frozen value continue to flow to the city, to the school district, county, to the technical college. And what happens is the city makes some type of investment within that geographical area that is intended to generate development, redevelopment, anything that will encourage and increase the tax base over time. So graphically, that would be the purple area on the chart as compared to the blue area, which is the base value. So all property in the state of Wisconsin is taxed uniformly at the same rate. When you use TIF, the distinction is not how much taxes are paid, but where the taxes go. So again, base value taxes continue to go to the overlying taxing jurisdictions as well as the city. However, all of the taxes collected on the incremental value or that purple area, those go into the TID special fund and are used to pay off that investment within the area. And the overall goal is really twofold. One is you're allowing something to happen that otherwise would not happen, but for the creation of the tax increment district, but then also the increased property value at the end of the TID life that then generates a higher level of taxes for all the jurisdictions. We'll look at the boundary in just a moment here, but we do have a reference here that the base value within this particular area that would become TID number 6 is about 34.3 million. And based on the projections, we would see that value increase to close to 100 million by the end of the district's life. So this is the area we are talking about in the inset map on the west side of the city. This is the former American Girl site. It's comprised of 4 parcels. The parcel in the upper right of the map is city-owned. That's a stormwater conveyance facility. The other 3 parcels are privately owned and contain a number of structures that would be rehabilitated, expanded for use as manufacturing and office facilities. We would therefore designate this as a mixed-use district. A mixed-use district is any area that is suitable for at least 2 of the following uses, commercial, industrial, or residential. In this case, there would be no residential. So we're strictly talking about commercial and industrial. And in this case, all of the area, with the exception of that city-owned parcel, is suitable for mixed-use development. So 95% of the district area meets that criteria, which exceeds the threshold. This district, again, has a maximum life of 20 years. So when we look at the benefits of the TID, I already mentioned that the increased property value is one of those benefits. But beyond that, this would take a currently underutilized site and would result in about $147 million private investment within the boundaries to, again, expand and rehabilitate facilities that are there. Most importantly, it would result in the retention of about 1,700 jobs that are currently within the city, with salary ranges that are indicated on the slide. And then over time, the creation of an additional 425 positions. Also, there will be economic benefit simply from the project itself in terms of the construction, the orders for supplies, materials, services, and so forth. Within a project plan, we have to identify costs that the city may incur in the implementation of the plan. The principal expenditure within this project plan is the payment of a development incentive. Again, the concept here is that without this type of an incentive, the city does not reasonably expect that this major employer within the city will continue to locate here and continue to expand here, and may potentially consider locations outside of the region and state. So that $10 million is a placeholder at this point. Any incentive that is agreed to, the final amount and the terms of that would be subject to a development agreement entered into by the Common Council. We've also included $4 million in city infrastructure costs. There's been identification of some potential regional stormwater management enhancements that may be needed, as well as potential street improvements, and there may be other costs that arise over the 20-year life of the district that the city finds necessary to make in order to achieve the district's objectives. Depending on the timing of that, these could be cash outlays, but it may include financing. So to that end, we've included a $1.5 million placeholder representing interest on potential long-term debt. And then the city will also have certain costs to create and administer the district over its life at roughly $320,000 all told. Just under 16 million in costs are forecasted in the plan. The incremental value of the development and redevelopment expected to occur within TID number 6 is projected to add 62 million in new value. That's above the base, not later than January 1st, 2029. This assumes that all of those activities would occur in that year. So to that extent, it's conservative. There may be value that would occur prior to that date, but if it all did occur during the 28 construction year, we would collect tax increments as shown with the projected total of 16.9 million at the city's current equalized tax rate. When we run that through a cash flow, we have on the revenue side, those tax increments coming in. We would have some interest earnings on fund balance as it accumulates. We have shown a projected borrowing in the year 2032 that would finance the public infrastructure improvements that are within the plan. Again, timing of those will be determined as the development moves forward, and the method of financing may involve borrowing, may involve cash, or combination thereof. Again, primary expenditure would be this $10 million pay-as-you-go development incentive. When I say pay-as-you-go, what that means is that the city would not borrow this money. It would not be provided to the property owner or the company up front. Rather, it would be paid from the tax increment as that tax increment is realized. So what that does is it mitigates risk for the city by avoiding the need to actually finance that. To the extent that there is financing of the public improvements, we have a placeholder for the estimated debt service, and then again, we show those public improvements being made in the year 2032. When we look at the cash flow in the aggregate, what it indicates is that the district would have roughly 1.3 million in unexpended funds if it were to remain open for its entire 20-year life. Just a quick note on the process. So anytime you create a tax increment district, the joint review board is convened. This is a body that consists of a representative from the city as well as a representative from each taxing jurisdiction and a public member. That meeting was held last week. If the Plan Commission this evening chooses to advance this, it would tentatively go to the Common Council on April 15th. At the moment, the total value of tax increment districts within the city exceeds what's referred to as a 12% valuation limit. So there is special legislation that is in process. It's been passed by the Senate committee and is available for a Senate vote. It's currently working its way through the process in the Assembly, and we need to wait until that legislation is actually enacted in order to allow the council to proceed with the creation. So again, April 15th is a tentative date. We don't expect it would be earlier than that, but it may need to push back depending on that legislative progress. And then once council considers and assuming it's approved, we need to reconvene that joint review board. They have a final say by a majority vote on whether to permit creation of the district. So that's where we are in the process. That's a snapshot of the district, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Questions from commissioners?
Do we want questions now or when we get to the resolution?
Well, you're not going anyplace for a while. All right. So we can wait if you prefer.
It doesn't matter
Okay.
to me. I just wondered if we have any members of the public who have comments.
It's right now we have one person signed up to speak, I assume. David, are you gonna? Need your name and address for the record?
David, 1337 North High Point Road in Middleton. I'm just here to speak in favor. I like the idea of trying to retain these jobs and improve the area that's outlined here. I think this is going to be a good thing for Middleton. The circumstances are could be better, but yet this is doing the best that we can with what we're presented. So I suggest we move forward with it. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Anybody else that would like to speak?
Mark, can you check the mic?
Okay.
Yeah. Were you able to hear on the mic okay? Okay. I got a text from one of our commissioners that they couldn't hear during David's presentation, so we'll just do a mic swap. It's one every meeting. Windows turned on.
It works. Okay, I hear, since there's nobody else that wants to speak, I'm gonna close the public hearing. And now we can look at questions for Todd. So,
Well, maybe you should do that part of the agenda item, because it's just a hearing. Just a suggestion.
Going in the second hearing.
Right.
So he's suggesting waiting for agenda item number 1, holding the other public hearing first.
okay. If everybody's okay with that, we'll go on to item 2 and circle back after this. So item 2 is a 7 o'clock public hearing for revisions to the floodplain ordinance. That's chapter 24, BC 1089.
I'm not aware of any comments provided by. He did. I heard him say that.
Go ahead, Mark.
I believe you closed the first hearing. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a hearing pertaining,
Okay,
this is a hearing pertaining to repealing and recreating chapter 24, the floodplain zoning ordinance. I'm not aware of any, I did not receive any written statements prior to the meeting.
okay. So I will close the public hearing on the floodplain ordinance and go to the minutes of March 11th, 2025. Any changes, recommendations? Seeing none, I will declare the minutes approved. So that gets us to agenda item 1, which is resolution 2025-17, consideration and possible action on the resolution establishing the boundaries of and approving the project plan for tax incremental district number 6. All right. The recommendation as it pertains to this is to discuss the comments from the public hearing and then considering recommending approval of the resolution. So are there questions for the for Todd from mailers, from the commissioners? Yes, Lisa.
I have questions, but I guess I'll start by moving that we recommend that council approve the project plan and that council approve resolution 2025-17, establishing the boundaries of and approving the project plan for tax incremental district number 6.
Is there a second?
100 Eagle Drive and adjacent parcels.
Is there a second?
Adams, a second.
Moved and seconded. Now we can do discussion. Lisa?
I'm wondering, you explained, thank you for the presentation, Todd, very helpful. And you explained the relationship between the timing of the legislation and council taking action. My question is, and maybe we can't get into this in a public session, but do we have a reasonable expectation that creating this TID is going to have the effect of retaining an employer? In other words, do we act before the employer signs a firm agreement with us? If we do and something falls through, what do we do with that TID?
I would defer to Abby to maybe comment on the first part of your question. With respect to the second part, so even though the council would potentially act as early as mid-April, this TID would not actually be filed with the Department of Revenue until early this fall. So I guess, one response is, even though you've gone through the process, you've created it, you can essentially just not send it in and certify it. If timing was such that the need for the TID went away after it was formally certified, you simply could close it to the extent that the city has incurred costs, which should be minimal at that point. It would really be the cost to have created it. So the professional services fees, that would be an unrecovered cost that the city would have to absorb. So you're not required to keep it open if it no longer has utility.
Okay.
Yep. And just to chime in on the first part of the question, our staff has been working very closely with both representatives of the major employer as well as the landowner for the American Girl site. There are representatives on the Zoom and in this room for both of those entities. The reason that we needed to move forward more quickly and seek special legislation is because the employer was down to the wire in making a choice between staying and then looking at a couple of other options out of state. And we couldn't create a TIF district quickly enough due to the 12% assessed valuation limit. But in all of our conversations with the representatives of the employer as well as the landowner, they are very close to signing a lease agreement for the property, assuming that things go well with creation of this TID. So we feel very good that they will move forward if we're able to do this.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Moving on to page 8 of the plan. Talks about parcel 0708-101, blah, 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 owned by the city of Middleton. It contains a small 0.07 acre stormwater pond. It goes on to say that this, to the extent this feature is considered a wetland, it is excluded from the district. And my question is it excluded from the district or is it excluded from development within the district?
Well, effectively both, because you wouldn't be able to develop in a wetland. So the TIF law states that you can't have a wetland within a TIF. The way the Department of Revenue allows you to manage that, because wetlands typically are not fully contiguous with a single parcel boundary, is they allow you to just put language in the plan and in the legal description that has to be filed with the state filing, that any wetlands are excluded. In this case, this was a little bit unusual because on the DNR wetland inventory map, that's what we go to look at to see if there are any wetlands. It shows as one. However, it's a city pond, so I don't know that it meets the requirement for a wetland, but just to, not leave anything unresolved in the plan document, or just identifying it as a wetland since it does show up on the DNR map.
Okay, and you mentioned ponds. I was heartened to see that we can use funding from the TID to pay for infrastructure improvements, not just roads, but also stormwater. And I'm just wondering, could this pond be of value for that?
I think in the brief discussions we had, there may be a need for some enhancement to that, is my understanding.
Yes, possibly that area as well as the confluence pond overall. And we wanted to include both stormwater as well as public infrastructure in the project plan to enable us to use TIP district funding for that, should we need it in the future.
Okay.
We don't have any specific project in mind at this point.
Okay. Reference is made to relocation costs on page 17, and I'm just curious, relocation of whom or what?
It's a required statutory plan element. There's no relocation that would be involved in the implementation of this plan.
Okay. All right. I'll reload. And then I know this won't have residential property, and I'm wondering why not?
It's currently not zoned for residential.
Could it be?
Not without a rezoning.
Yeah, it would have to go through a rezoning, but I believe that the intent of the property owner is to utilize the full private development site for expansion for this.
Okay, I just know that we're hoping that there will be, in addition to the 1,700 jobs retained, there could be an additional 425 jobs, and I'm thinking about where we're going to put housing for 425 more people, which, obviously we'd like to welcome them to Middleton. It seemed like there might have been an
Well,
opportunity there, but
I'd just like to add that this is a commercial light industrial area, so I don't think we've ever entertained any kind of residential there, but I guess it doesn't mean we couldn't consider it, but in this case, it doesn't sound like we should.
Yep. And then why not change the PUD to standard zoning districts, or is that not ruled out?
I don't think we've ruled it out. I'm not sure if we're far enough along in working with the property owner to understand the layout of the current facilities and how they might change and what kind of zoning district would work. I think that I believe that the translating district from the comp plan would be RP or Research Park. So we'd have to take a look at that and make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences from rezoning it.
Okay, and then finally, does the state or do you have any guidance on administrative costs and how much the city can charge?
So the costs that I put in there are what we typically include. You're gonna have a little more cost on the front end because there's a cost to create the district. And then there's a bit of additional cost at the end related to audit. So the amounts that I put in there, I showed it to you on the aggregate in the slide. But on an annualized basis, in the second year, it's 10,000, and then I inflated it by 1% per year. In my experience, that should be sufficient to cover the direct costs associated with the city's administration.
And are we able to recoup any of those costs retroactive to the creation of the TID? So like Abby and other staff working on it now, is that something we can?
Any costs that were incurred and are incidental to evaluating the feasibility of the district are eligible project costs. In this case, we're not projecting that the district will actually generate any revenue until budget year 2030. So from a practical standpoint, there won't be cash there. It will run a deficit up to the point that increment starts to be generated.
That's all.
Okay, anybody else?
Kurt Paulson has his hand
Oh,
raised.
Kurt. You're on.
Yeah.
You're on.
Yep, Todd, can you just talk for a minute about the parcels that are also in TID 3 and what happens to those when TID 3 ends?
So whatever value is on those parcels as of January 1st of this year will remain in TID number 3. So TID number 3, for as long as it remains open, will continue to collect increment on that value. At the point that TID 3 closes, again, whatever incremental value was there as of the 1st of this year will be released into the general tax base, and we'll start generating property taxes for all the overlying jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Unless we extend it,
Well,
which council is going to be considering in April, so.
while we're talking about plans, and anytime you're talking about a plan, it can change. Anybody else? Hearing none, I'll call the question then. You want to repeat the Mark?
It's to recommend approval of the motion. I don't have the exact.
Okay.
I move that we recommend the council approve resolution 2025-17, establishing the boundaries of and
TID 3.
continuing on with the rest of the agenda item.
Okay. And there was a second from Nick.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your participation. Todd, thank you. Okay, agenda item 2 is the sign design review for the Bauman Community Pool. Recommendation is to approve the new sign and logo. Is anybody here to speak to that? No? Well, if everybody saw the new logo with our friendly little walrus.
I was simply going to add that there's been some questions about the origin of the concept of the walrus, and the pool has long been named after Walter Bauman, and in the desire to rebrand it as the Bauman Community Pool, the idea was to keep Wally the walrus as a tribute to Walter Bauman, and his family is delighted with that. So
It was good to know.
Lisa has it.
Yeah,
Before I move approval, I have a question.
sure.
Do we get to approve logos for the city? Because the staff recommendation is to approve the new sign and logo, and I didn't know if that meant logo.
Yeah.
or
Where's the
plate.
car at?
What's
Uh,
it say?
I'm not sure that we've done any kind of logo
Yeah,
approval in the
it
past.
seems-
We left that up to the applicant.
I would say, I kind of was wondering that too, when I saw that, because I'm like, we approved the logo on last week, and I was assuming like this was just approving a new sign for for the pool.
I wonder if it just got copied over from the parks agenda and the
That could
language
be.
wasn't changed.
That would
Okay.
explain it. Okay. Look, Nick, would you like to move?
I will move approval of the sign for the Bellman Community Pool.
There a second?
I'll second that.
Randy seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, item 3 is the site plan review for the Middleton High School baseball / softball field projects north of 2100 Bristol Street.
Hello, good evening. Lindsay Beeman with Point of Beginning, just on behalf representing the school district.
Okay. You're here to answer any questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions that anybody might have?
All right, the recommendation from staff is the site plan approval contingent on 2 items. Baseball, softball is on a former landfill and requires a DNR approval of materials management plan. And item 2 is the stormwater management plan review and approval. Questions, Abby?
I just had one thing to add that Lindsay and I have been emailing about, as well as with some school district representatives. One of the staff comments that has been embedded previously on the plan set by our engineers is calling attention to a storm sewer pipe that cuts on the diagonal beneath the ball field. That is a city facility, and it's a corrugated metal pipe from 1968 that may be near the end of its service life. I know on the previous plans, we had suggested that it be rerouted around the baseball facility. However, in talking with our public works director, it sounds like that would be very expensive to do and also very challenging. And so I asked him about just reconstructing it in place so that it doesn't fail 2 years after the new facility is built. And he said that that would be less costly, but there's not money in the city budget in 2025 to do that work. So I think where we left it with Lindsay is that we're going to try to set up a meeting with Point of Beginning and our city public works department just to see if there is anything that can be done. You know, maybe it's worth getting a cost estimate and taking it to the council to consider trying to align the replacement of that pipe along with their groundbreaking for their project, which is going to be in June of this year. So we would be on a pretty tight timeline if we were able to make it happen. But I think one of the things we really would want to avoid is they're constructing and opening their new facility, and then within like 6 months, something happens with that old pipe. So I don't have an answer for you tonight, but it's something that we're gonna try to discuss.
Were you aware of that?
Yeah, yep, I
Okay.
do remember comments from last year. I went back actually and looked at our submittal and what was commented. And then Abby addressed it earlier in an email this week.
Okay.
But I did make mention that 36-inch existing pipe that runs underneath the baseball field. The plans or the developments that we're planning for that baseball field are not as invasive as last year. So basically we're maintaining our infield. We're just doing some top dressing. We are rebuilding the outfield with amended topsoil, under drain, things like that. But I think a large portion of that pipe runs underneath the infield that we're really not doing much to.
Because you had planned on turf before and
Correct. Yep.
you don't have to do as much. That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. So is there any other discussion?
Abby, is there a recommendation or a contingency that you want to add to this recommendation then?
I don't know if there would be a contingency for site plan approval. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend adding anything. It is just something to be aware of that it remains to be determined. I think their plan is to go ahead and move forward with their facility, whether or not the city is able to replace the pipe before they start work.
Mhm.
All right. If there are no other questions, Lisa?
I have a question on page 55. I think it's the staff memo. I was very glad to see that we won't need to remove any part of this site from the environmental corridor. It's unnecessary because sports fields are compatible use within the environmental corridor and could remain mapped as such. And I just want to make sure that the district and your contractors know what's required when working within an environmental corridor, even if it's just a small amount. Because there are some additional requirements that might apply.
Okay.
I don't know that they will, but just to be aware of that. And then how will the infrared heaters be powered?
So those were actually being bid as an alternate, so I'm not sure if they're gonna be accepted or not. But we did have our electrical engineer actually routing, electrical to those heaters and those dugouts. It's still to be determined if they're gonna be approved or not.
Are any of the games played during the day?
That is a great question. I would assume not. I would assume practice is held from probably 3 to 7 PM, and then your games are probably from 5 to 7 PM, so.
I'm just wondering about the potential for solar. I was very disappointed when the new entrance to the stadium went in. It was oriented exactly the opposite of what you would do to make solar a possibility. And at least now solar and batteries are less expensive. Who knows what will happen, but just something to think about because I know the school district also has a renewable energy goal. So
Sure.
that's it.
Okay, any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I think we have, did we get one? I guess we didn't.
No, we didn't. I don't
We
think.
jumped the gun. Well, this is an IRO. I move approval of the site plan contingent on 1, baseball, softball is on former landfill site and requires a DNR approval of a materials management plan, and 2, stormwater management plan review and approval by the city engineer.
There a second?
Adams will second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, item 4 is the site implementation plan SIP amendment for Middleton Shores redevelopment. And
We do have a couple people here who are available to answer questions. Did you want to make any remarks too? If that's okay with you, Mr. Chair?
that's fine.
Hi, Kathleen Laird with Corb Architecture. And I'm just here to answer any questions. I think Mark did a great write-up on some of the changes that we've made since we were here last, and some of the exploratory things that we did with the site, and the changes being, that we could go down a level with more geotechnical information, and that really was kind of the start of us re-examining the design from the last time that you saw it. So any clarifications that you'd like, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. When this was originally went through the review, the thought was that underground parking wasn't available. for the
Correct.
site. And I know that the commission had questioned whether the building could just be pushed down and reduced in height. Why was that not the solution then taken once you saw that underground parking was available? Why not just lower the building down in height?
Sure, that's a perfectly good question. With the amount of geotechnical information that we had at the time, we felt that that was the responsible design response. We were balancing that with the owner's risk, threshold for where that water table is. For various reasons, we needed to seek out more geotechnical information since we saw this committee last. And that started to point us to this being more of an option that we could entertain.
Yeah.
And so we continued down that road, also knowing that that was something that you wanted to see as well. So it worked out well with some of the client's goals, and I think they became more comfortable with the idea of getting closer to the water table.
And I guess, and I appreciate that because I think it's a better solution.
Mhm.
But but what's instead of taking the old design and just pushing it down a floor, you've actually left the height where it is and recouped additional space on the second level that was parking for additional housing. Why was that the solution that was implemented?
To better balance the project, it made sense to add more density. This site is great for adding density because it's so well connected to public transportation and other amenities. So it seemed to make sense that we had this opportunity. And then we could also in turn line that second floor, which we again knew that the city would prefer to see as well. So it started to work hand in hand fairly well.
Any other questions?
I have no more.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had a
Yeah.
couple of questions. Why aren't the utilities being undergrounded as part of this construction project? There's no mark in your memo about appreciating that the images include the above ground utilities.
Yeah, those are public utilities along the street. They're not on private property. That comment actually is from my report from last year. I just
Okay.
kept it in there.
Okay. But with all the work that's going on in that area, the intersection, there's no way, isn't this part of one of the city's goals is to try to get everything?
Yeah, I mean, the type of utilities that are hanging overhead there are so significant. You know, I mean, I can't speak to what all they are, but it's a very heavy duty quarter of utilities. And I'm sure it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to bury them for just a block, well, a block or two. So I don't know what the cost is, but that was not something that we expected of them, especially since this is not in a TIF district. It's not on their property. I just wanted to point out, you can see them very faintly here in this drawing, but it just is nice to have a design that shows what the reality is instead of just, you know, not
Yeah.
everybody does that. Not every designer does that.
There's another rendering that shows them even more.
Yeah, I think
clearly.
last time we were here, there's some question about the landscape design and the response was that we had to, respond to those power lines being there.
Yep. On page 125, it talks about the TIA
125 of the packet.
of the packet. Yep. And it says the proposed 161 unit redevelopment is anticipated to generate an additional 518 daily trips, 22 morning peak hour trips, and 24 afternoon peak hour trips. And it seemed odd to me that there would only be 22 peak hour trips in the morning and 24 in the afternoon. That doesn't seem like a lot of people in a 161 unit building. And
Our
could that be-
city traffic consultant, SRF, reviewed this a couple months ago. And this was reviewed with their city engineering staff. I can't speak to the
Okay.
details. I don't know if you have any insights.
We didn't generate the
Yeah,
report, so I don't want to guess.
This went through the Public Works Committee?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Well, actually, I don't know if the revised findings went through there, but the original TIA went through there April of last year, which was a
April of last year.
contingency of approval. And then we specifically, working with the city engineer, we asked SRF to look at the increased number of units and determine whether that required a change to the TIA. And that was what I'm reporting here in the staff.
Okay. This is still not a good fit for the MRH zoning district, is that correct?
Not the MRH, because the MRH is limited to a height of 5 stories, and this is a 7-story.
5 stories with the additional, the possibility of bonus.
Bonus,
Well, that's true. Thank you.
bonus 2 floors if it's net zero
Right.
and,
Right. They essentially, I mean, the way I treated this is the zoning is in place for a 7-story, 80, I'm sorry, I don't remember the height, 85-foot building. They are working within the parameters of the previous zoning. That's how I started
Okay.
this.
I'm
my
just
review.
always looking for ways
Yeah.
to get back to,
Yeah, no,
get
I
away from
appreciate that.
PUD.
And we
It is-
tried, I talked with the property owners about this early on, and unfortunately, we had to abandon that effort to try and have it be MRF. We could have looked at a mixed-use urban zoning classification, but we don't have any of that east of Parmenter Street in the city. So that would have been isolated area and it wouldn't have been consistent with our comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
Debbie, you had an
Yeah, I was just gonna answer Lisa's question about the TIA. The reason that those numbers seem low is because those are reflecting the addition of 45 dwelling units.
Okay.
So that's not the total of 161 units, it's the change from going from 116 to 161.
Right, and in the second line, I said the additional 518 daily trips. Maybe I misunderstood your question, I'm sorry.
No. So that was my question. Okay. And then finally, you're not using the mass timber construction that we talked about very early on in this project?
Correct. I think ownership went really far down the road, trying to make that a reality. And at a certain point, when we looked at the budget numbers, and now the current climate is a little bit more challenging yet, it needed to pivot. But I think they're still really focused on this being a legacy building, being very high quality and enduring, which is, the overall goal
Okay.
with either type of construction. So we're looking at more of a precast scenario.
And what about any sustainability measures such as solar, or I don't know if geothermal is a possibility there?
Yeah, geothermal isn't a possibility with the area that we have available, but that's a great thought. I know today we kicked off our meeting with our MEP, FP engineers, and especially with the heating and cooling of the building, it is a real focus to keep that energy efficient because again, this is a developer and owner that holds their buildings for years. They don't turn them over. So they're very interested in keeping it energy efficient as well.
And Mark, you mentioned this is working within the framework of the previous zoning code. What about EV charging capabilities in the parking areas? Is that
So
anticipated?
when this was previously approved, so it was approved before we adopted our new zoning ordinance.
Right.
So I did not review this against the new zoning ordinance requirements. I did not review it against every aspect of the new zoning ordinance because I recognize they had their entitlement for the previous project. However, I did call out the bicycle parking as a concern, and that's why that is included in the staff comments.
Why didn't you call out EV charging?
I could have, I guess. I mean, I didn't feel that was, I don't know, I guess I could have. But that's certainly your prerogative to discuss that with them.
Would you be at all willing to incorporate some EV charging
It
stations?
has been a conversation, even as part of the last process that we were looking into that. I'm going to speak as an architect, not as owner for a minute. We're kind of counseling our owners to keep an eye on it because insurance companies are responding very differently to where those are located, exterior of the building versus interior. And we're seeing some shifts there. Ownership is very interested in that. And Tammy, I'll give you the mic if you'd like to expand, but we had told them, let's keep that in mind. Let's aim for that because they know that their residents are going to want it. But we want to see kind of how this plays out so that the building can be insured as well. So whether they're inside the building or outside is kind of up for debate. And now that we have engaged the engineers, we're very curious to see, okay, so from an infrastructure standpoint, how many can we plan for? How many do we do on day one? And how many can we plan for the future?
Okay, I appreciate that. I think it'd be wonderful if you did wind up putting it outdoors. It'd be great if you could configure it in such a way that it could be under a solar canopy and partially powered by that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Kurt has hands.
Pardon?
Kurt Paulson is
Oh,
waiting.
yeah, Kurt?
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to follow up. You had flagged the bicycle parking issue. Is that addressed just with that contingency and the SIP approval?
Well, our new code actually would require the site to have, I want to say it was 207 or 200, I think it was 207 internal spaces internal to the building. And I think it was 17 for guests. They were proposing, I think it was 84 and did not increase that from the original, what was approved last year. And so given that they're increasing the number of units by 45, I felt it was appropriate to require an increase in the number of bicycle parking spaces. And given that they are going down into the basement, below ground with parking, I felt this was an opportunity to provide at least one rack per dwelling unit. That seemed like a reasonable compromise. So that's where that came from.
Okay, but it's currently zoned with the 2023 GDP, right?
Right, which
But that ties the number of bike parking stalls to the number of units? Does it have a formula or just a number?
I don't remember how we came up with 84 at the time. I will say that our previous zoning code didn't have any bicycle parking requirements. So that was where we landed at the time.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. I don't think that there was, and that was kind of something that you and I collaborated on. I think initially we had maybe 50, and then as part of the SIP process, or just before that approval, we increased to 84.
And so this SIP contingency would be 161, which is is one bike space per unit, right?
Yeah, and our new zoning ordinance would actually require 211, I think off the top of my head, because it would require for a 2-bedroom unit an additional half parking space. So if based on, I think it was 91 2 units and 71 unit, is that right?
Yeah, I think your original email had said 207.
Yeah. So the formula would require 207. What they got authorized for under the previous SIP was for 84. They obviously have had a previous design they were working with. The new design did not increase the bicycle parking, which is what caused my concern. And I know that I'm sure they're not completely happy with this requirement. I could go to the drawing showing you where it is if you want. It's on page.
Yeah, I saw it.
Well, I was just going to show since we're talking about it.
Oh, yeah, show the one.
The flight,
But normally we review bicycle parking numbers at a site design, or is that a zoning issue?
well, this is through the SIP process. Yes, this is through the site. This is essentially site plan review.
Yeah.
So I felt it was appropriate to flag it. It's right. So as I understand it, it's the space, right, Kathleen?
Correct.
As opposed to, so it's an enclosed space, which is probably very similar to the previous floor plan. I didn't actually look at the previous floor plan. I was focusing on the exterior of the building and the improvements that Commissioner Bruce noted with the second story appearance with the residential units facing Century and Allen Court, which I thought was very a great improvement. Just since we're talking about that, here's the second story floor plan, which shows those units now, the 12 facing those two public streets. So that is a significant improvement. The bicycle parking is tucked away here. It's hard to expand this space because of, well, I mean, I suppose it could be expanded, but that's where they have accessible parking.
Right.
So there'd have to be some modifications. What I've suggested is, and I haven't necessarily prescribed a specific way to address it, but there are other ways to provide. It's not uncommon for a building of this sort to provide parking, bicycle parking just out in the open as well. So there's the potential to convert some of these spaces. They are definitely about 50% above our minimum parking requirement. They want to still have, obviously for the 2-bedroom, they'd like to have more than one vehicle parking space per unit, but it seems to me we should have at least one bicycle parking space per unit. So that's where that came from.
Mark,
You're satisfied with that requirement, Mark? I don't need to get into the details, but.
do you allow bike parking to be wall mounted in front of the car?
We have we have design requirements and there are limitations along those lines. If it is wall mounted in front of the car, there has to be a clear area to have access to the bicycle. That's in section 10.0606. It gets very detailed, so I didn't want to get into those details. I much prefer seeing a separate area for bicycles. I know the Lake 61 project, which is the closest new building to the site, they have a separate area for bicycle parking. I saw it the other day as I was walking by it. The garage was open and I saw the bike parking there. So the key is to have the bicycle parking very accessible to the tenants, to the residents of the building. And if they're mounted vertically in front of a parking space, that doesn't make the bicycle very accessible. So that's why we have some standards for where bicycle parking is to occur. There is somebody else who has her hand up. It's Anna. Oh, Anna, that must be, okay. Do you want to recognize her too? She's probably
Oh,
the
Erin?
owner.
Part
Yeah,
part of
ownership
the
group.
ownership, Anna
Oh,
Case.
oh, yeah.
So I've asked to unmute her. Oops. I'll try it again, Anna, just a second. All right, you still show as being muted. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. What do you press for that again?
I think I know what she's gonna say, otherwise,
Okay.
I'm one of the owners too,
If you can
Tammy,
come
why
up
don't
to
you, we can swap here.
is my guess, but.
the-
Hi, my name is Tammy Paschke. I'm one of the owners too. I'm Sue Case's sister and I'm Anna's aunt. We are in customer service and we want our tenants to be happy. And if we need more parking spaces for bikes, we're gonna make sure we have them. You know, that's not something that's a question in our mind. We're not going with only a specific number that, you know, we'll do what's requested, but if we need more, we're gonna find more space for them. That's how we work. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a couple comments. I appreciate your working with the staff on the solution. I do think, Mark, that the design solutions is better and it's an improvement over what the original SIP was, and I do appreciate that. Honestly, I'm uncomfortable with the increase in density and parking and calling this a SIP modification. So
We called it an SIP amendment.
amendment.
Yeah.
SIP amendment. I feel that really would be more appropriately a GDP, new GDP or GDP amendment. But that's not my call, that's yours. But for that reason, and the fact that the height is still above what we would allow otherwise without appropriate bonus heights, I'm gonna vote against the measure. But I do appreciate your efforts and I do think it's a better design solution, so thank you.
Yes, Kurt?
Well, I was gonna follow up on Randy's comment about difference in GDP and SIP. Does the oh, there it is. Does the GDP actually specify a number of units?
It did not. Well, actually did here, didn't it? The public hearing for the, when we rezoned to GDP did not specify a number of units. I don't believe. I can check that quickly.
No, I think that's right.
Well, I want to be able to answer that definitively. So one of the issues with the GDP is you have to determine whether the SIP is reasonably consistent with the GDP. And at the time, a year ago, we decided that 116 was reasonably consistent. The density was reasonably consistent. The height was reasonably consistent. Impervious surface area stayed the same at 69%. Parking spaces went down a little bit. And so a year ago, we determined it was consistent. So the question that I looked at when I approached this, when this application came in, is this increase, the 39% increase, which is obviously not an insignificant increase on the face of it, is that reasonably consistent with the previously approved SIP, which we found was consistent with the GDP. And that's where I turned to things like the traffic study, which said it was a negligible increase. I looked at the height of the building, which wasn't changing. I looked at the footprint, which wasn't changing. The setbacks weren't changing, and we were getting a better design. And so for those reasons, I decided as the zoning administrator that it was reasonably consistent, but it required an amendment of the SIP since there were changes. That's how I reached my decision.
Okay.
So the height is not changed from either the GDP or the first SIP.
It actually, from what I could tell, it actually has gone down a foot at most.
Yeah.
Yeah, we changed construction types, that resulted in a small decrease in the height.
I'm going to echo something Commissioner Bruce said with regards to height. I was not on the planning commission when this project first came in front of this body, but I did pay attention to this pretty closely. I don't feel comfortable, and I know this is approved before current zoning map, but when our current zoning code was approved and the maps were approved, but when we approved the maps, we approved a map in such a way that this building would not be allowed if it were to be first presented to us now. Right? Because nothing inside the Beltline really would allow this height to be built into the current maps. Am I correct?
When you say our current maps, you mean the zoning?
Yes.
map? The standardized zoning map, the maximum height is a 5-story building east of Parmenter Street.
Yeah.
So west of Parmenter, which is inside the Beltline,
Mhm.
is allowed up to 10 stories.
Okay.
This site is zoned PUD, and they had to get a conditional use permit to exceed the height. So our comprehensive plan actually contemplated the possibility of a higher building, but there's language in the comprehensive plan that said it would require conditional use permit. They applied for and received
Okay.
the conditional use permit.
Okay.
So the zoning is in place, and if the effect of voting against this amendment tonight would be to say you're stuck building the previous
Right.
project.
Yeah. So, and I think also like the question, I had a very similar question, you know, if you're able to go down, why not just go down and have just the building a little bit lower to kind of be more in tune with what's kind of like in the heart of the city of Middleton, and especially that area. You know, across the street, it's a 3 or 4 story building at Harbor. You know, I know the Lake 61 is 4 or 5 stories, but where that's located is so far down a hill, it doesn't really protrude up very much, where this is going to be, you know, almost like a centerpiece as you're coming up Allen Boulevard. And it's just, you know, I was kind of uncomfortable with how this is going to fit in that neighborhood. Or in that area of the city. Still kind of uncomfortable, but I understand the kind of the quandary we're going to be in right now. If I vote against this, we're still going to have the same height, but I just want to share my thoughts on that.
And for what it's worth, I think just going back to the original SIP approval process, I don't want to speak for people on the committee, but I think that there was actually enthusiasm for that amount of density because of how connected this site is to amenities and to public transportation. So the potential really led, I think, this committee at that time to feel like they were comfortable with that number of stories, being that this was sort of an exception because of its connectivity.
Okay, Lisa.
Well, I'm going to vote for this change. I appreciate Commissioner Paulson and Commissioner Bruce giving us a reason to walk through the GDP and SIP comparison in the process. I chair the Workforce Housing Committee, so I'm delighted that we have an opportunity to keep the building the same height above ground and add additional housing. I think that is a wonderful development. I'm actually very thrilled to see development going up, not on farmland in my own district. So my district is really, we're really going above and beyond for the city. And so I appreciate that your building will do the same. And I think there's maybe nothing wrong with it being did you call it a centerpiece or something like that? As you're coming down Allen Boulevard, I think that would be, I think it would be striking. I did have a question about contingency number 8 regarding the installation of art to soften the southwest building corner. Can we go to the rendering, the new rendering for that? Because
Sure.
I'm wondering if that is still needed.
Do you have a page for that? I'm sorry.
I think it's page 242 of the packet.
Yeah, and that corner right now is comprised of glass and will remain as such. One thing we realized after that initial SIP is that we do have our stormwater swale going through that area. So We were mindful that if we continued looking at art installation options, that it would need to be something that could be viewed from afar, not up close, because of the way that the site design developed. So
Is this the
that
corner
would be
you're
our
talking about?
focus.
Yeah.
Correct. Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I see why.
At the time, also, that was when we had 2 stories of parking. So now, since the second floor is occupied space with residential units, I agree. I feel like there's less of a need for it because we're bringing life all the way down to that second story. But I will defer to this committee.
Abby, you and Commissioner Summers are the art people. Do you remember, was the intent to do it on the corner or right where those bicycles are, the people on bikes? It just seems like maybe the need for art is not there anymore.
I think that pertained to the old design and that is that right, Mark? That the artwork was only going to be if that section was parking at grade and not windows in order to
Mhm.
create visual interest at the pedestrian scale.
I'm just want to see what the. Oh, we still, yeah, so what I did is I just kept the same language that was in the previous approval. So that remains a requirement unless you remove it. I agree that they've improved the design of the building at the second story. I do have the renderings in the packet where I compared, sorry, I'm not as good at this as Daphne is.
Nobody is.
Yeah,
It's
we
okay.
do have balconies now at that second level on both facades that comprise that corner. So it
So
gets
what
us a little closer.
What I tried to do was, I knew this would come up, or I figured this would come up. And oops, where's my staff report here? It's up here, sorry. I put in, here it is. So I put in a before, a 1 year ago and this iteration comparison. Because I figured this would be meaningful. So this is that southwest corner. Yeah, here it is. So this is the previously approved SIP, and technically this was going to have parking up here, even though they were using larger windows, but they were probably going to cover them and be opaque, I would guess.
They would be acid etched. Yeah, they would
okay.
be like a frosted, but now they'll be clear glass. And again, we have balconies kind of at that second
Right.
level.
So, but the art requirement was at the ground level, and the ground level is really not changed. I mean, what they're showing here is this, what was it called? Acid, what's the term?
Acid etched or,
Acid etched.
yeah.
So it's like a darker,
It's just a frosted. It's just the technical
okay.
term for like a frosted glass.
I'm not seeing a need for art here. I wonder if this is something, Abby, do you envision this as maybe the city paying for the art? As part of our 0.5% for the arts and just getting the developer to agree to house it?
I did not put that recommendation together, and so I wouldn't want to presuppose that the Arts Committee would want to use their funding for public art on a private building.
Well, I mean, we don't have this at the Trotta or at the Kestrel or any of the apartments going up in my district. So I'm going to move to amend, actually, we don't have a motion yet. Well, that makes it easy.
Make a
So
motion.
so I'm going to move that we approve the amendment to the SIP with the following 9 contingencies. And those are the ones showing on the screen, minus number 8, which will be renumbered, or which will go, and 9 will be 8, and 10 will be.
9.
Yes, 9. That's my motion.
This is Paulson. I'll second that motion.
Okay, Kurt, you second? Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Motion carries. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 6 is the final plat for Pheasant Crossing Phase 1 west
Actually,
of
I
High
think we-
Road.
I'm sorry, I think we're on 5, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it was
The
certified
CSM.
survey.
Oh. Well, what did we just approve? I thought that was the
The
item.
same,
That
same
was the
development. Now
SIP,
it's-
same project.
Oh,
this is
okay.
the-
So it's at the bottom of the screen.
Gotcha. Well,
This is Hanira.
Yeah.
I'll move approval of the certified survey map for Middleton Shores redevelopment, 6140 Century Avenue,
is there a
With
second?
those contingencies.
With the contingencies?
with the two contingencies showing on the screen.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Yes?
Yes, so what is the status of Outlot 1? Will that be dedicated to the public? We see the, yep. We would like it to be.
No, Outlot 1 is not dedicated to the public.
Who's-
That's Anna Case.
Oh, Anna, you're there now. Good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And can someone explain the word lands on lot 1 and lot, I guess it's out lot 1. There's the word lands underlined and I don't know what that means.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm not looking at that page. I'm looking at 243 with the 2 pages up. Okay, so you see where it says, I just see the word lands 3 times actually. Out lot 1, lot 1 and lot 2. It's just this word.
Oh, right here, lands,
Yeah.
I see. And now that I know what you're talking about, what is the question again? Sorry.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
That is land.
Uh,
Is it, when I thought it was only on 1 and outlot 1, I thought it was maybe conservancy lands above that line or something. So can anyone explain what
It's
that?
also on number 3 here.
Yeah. Oh, it is on number 3.
Yeah, it's on all of them.
Do not make. a
JSC
lands-
JSC is gonna help
Don't
us.
make a Land's End joke, please.
I haven't made any jokes.
My name's Alex Mayo. I'm with JSD Professional Services, project engineer. I can just speak from my limited survey background here that the lands there is just indicating that it's not like currently platted lands, that these were done via the CSM, so they're not part of a larger subdivision at any point.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
So that's the motion you have before you.
comments, I think you have a question.
All right. No other comments? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 6 is the final plat for Pheasant Crossing Phase 1 west of High Road. Recommendation is deferral. Pretty easy one.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah, we do.
It's
Okay.
on the agenda, so.
Yeah.
it needs to be.
I move to defer consideration of the final plat for Pheasant Crossing Phase 1 west of High Road until April.
Is there a second?
Adam seconds.
Any discussion?
So it's until the April,
I
Eighth
just said
meeting?
April just in case. I mean, I know you're planning on April 8th, and that's good. But if we get another extension, this will be good for April.
okay, so, okay.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, and that
Back
gets
to that
us,
is the end of April, essentially, is what you're saying. I'm just,
Just, we'll consider it in April.
okay,
We can pick which meeting.
okay.
okay, item 7 is the revision to the floodplain ordinance, chapter 24.
This is Haniro. As a member of the Water Resources Management Commission, I move that we recommend to the Common Council the repeal of Chapter 24 of our municipal code, our floodplain ordinance, and replacement with the version approved by the WRMC.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
I would respectfully urge some caution here because you saw it at the WRMC in February.
Nope. We just saw it at our last meeting.
Oh, last week, you mean?
Yes, and we made a recommendation to add the X 175 language and not include the CRS program participation.
Okay, it's probably the same version that we, so the reason I'm hemming and hawing is because we worked until a week and a half ago with the DNR on tweaking a couple little things in response to our city attorney's comments. And so I don't recall if WRC's packet had the absolute latest version of it. So that's why, but this one does, this packet does. So that's the only reason why I'm cautioning that it might be better to not mention the WRMC's guidance is reflected in this ordinance. But there might be a word change or two here or there that is different here. I just can't, I just don't remember off the top of my head. I had so many versions of this thing. So the CRS program and the other issue are addressed in this packet that's in the Plan Commission, but there was one line of section 3.2. I can go to it if you'd like.
Well, Mr. Chair, without objection, I'd like to amend my motion to end with replacement with the version in the Plan Commission packet.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
And
You accept that?
I'll accept that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Please not.
I think what it is, Lisa, and I'm happy to share it with you.
It's fine.
I just don't, since the language is now reinserted, I'm just looking for where it is. It's 3 point. Just want to make sure it's under prohibited uses. We had to we had to add 3.4 number 3 back into the ordinance. I don't recall if that language, that was something the DNR requested, and I don't recall if that language was stricken in the water resources language. It just, it's meanings.
I just wanted to make it clear to my colleagues on the Plan Commission that WRMC has looked this over and
thank you.
given it a thumbs up, because I don't think that was mentioned in the packet.
Probably not. Sorry about that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, one and all.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
8:15.
See,
No,
see,
for him,
Commissioner
it's
Paulson,
pretty
that's the
darn
way
good.
to do a friendly
Thank you,
amendment.
Kurt. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you.
Without objection.
This was a 300-page